Hi, this is your host Apul Bhartiya, and we are here at Open Source Summit in Seattle. And today we have with us once again Elizabeth Joseph, Head of Open Source Program Office at IBM Z. Elizabeth, it's good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure to host you here today. And today we are going to talk about Linux working group, right?
That's right.
We talked about that at previous Open Mainframe Summits as well. Give us some kind of overview of what is the goal, idea behind this group.
We kind of saw this need in the community because we have Linux distribution maintainers who are focused on IBM Z and LinuxONE, but they were the only one in their distribution, or there was only one or two of them in their distribution who were supporting the platform and fixing the bugs in the platform whenever they came up in the build systems. And that turned out to be somewhat isolating, and it was a lot of work. So there was some sort of side channel collaboration between the distributions. So someone from Fedora may know someone from OpenSUSE or ask someone at Red Hat, and they would just sort of informally ask questions. And there was always contacts at IBM, but we didn't have a way for us to more officially sort of collaborate between all of the distributions that were out there supporting the platform. So a couple of years ago, we formed the working group in order to have that structured engagement. So we have a mailing list, we have monthly meetings, and a wiki where we sort of collect our notes and make sure that we're all aligned on what our resources are for the platform. So
what is Linux doing on Z systems? They have their own OS.
Yeah, so the surprising thing about Linux on the mainframe is that we've been doing it for about 25 years. So the first patches for the Linux kernel sort of came around 1998-ish. IBM published them and got them upstreamed into the Linux kernel at the end of 1999. So we're looking at a pretty big legacy of the support on the platform. But I'd say with the release of the LinuxONE system back in, I think, 2016, which is a Linux-only mainframe, that really was like the step that IBM took in the direction of like, we are very much committed to this platform. In fact, we create a whole system that is only Linux. And then on the platform, I mean, the Linux workloads, it's sort of aligned with our modernization strategies. So a lot of companies are really interested in making sure that they can use microservices and make sure that their Linux workloads are close to their traditional mainframe workloads. And that's pretty much what they end up doing with them. We do sell the Linux ones alone as well. So there are companies that just use LinuxONE in their infrastructure, and then they're just fully devoted to Linux.
And what are the expected use cases for Linux systems?
It's generally around data. So companies that are processing a lot of data or storing a lot of data, it's really the big caches in the CPU are designed to do that most effectively. So you see companies that are, some of the big use cases recently are like doing like fraud detection. So they're processing a lot of transactions through their systems, and that needs to be done quickly and accurately, and that's where they bring in Z and the Linux side of things as well.
The reason I was asking that question was also to now understand, that now people will be able to relate that why we need a Linux distribution, working group. Can you talk about what kind of distributions are officially supported? But the beauty of open source and Linux community, especially with Linux community, don't care about officially supported. We'll support it either way. But jokes apart, talk about which are those distributions supported and just what kind of work you folks are doing in that group.
So the first officially supported Linux distribution on the platform was SUSE Enterprise Linux. And I like to frame it as so the first time SUSE used the phrase Enterprise Linux was on the mainframe version. So anything that SUSE Enterprise Linux that's not on the mainframe is a port. So the mainframe is the original. So SUSE was the first. Red Hat followed soon after. So Red Hat Enterprise Linux joined the platform. I think it was just a few months later. And Ubuntu didn't come to the platform until the release of the LinuxONE, and those were actually announced at the same time at a LinuxCon in 2016. So Ubuntu is a relative newcomer, but those are the big three. The Linux distributions working group brought together the community distributions along inside that conversation. So we do have folks from SUSE who join our calls, and sometimes Ubuntu and Red Hat as well, who are part of the working group on our mailing list, sometimes join our calls. But what we were really focused on, and like I was working in the Debian community, Sarah Julia, who we've had on the show before, she was working in the OpenSUSE community, still is. We had a representative from Fedora, and we were kind of the core of what began the working group, and we pretty much brought everyone else in. And in the case of these distributions, as some of your folks watching this may know, is like Debian builds up the core of what gets pulled into Ubuntu, and same with Fedora and Red Hat and OpenSUSE and SUSE. And so these community-driven distributions end up being a really integral component to the enterprise divisions distributions down the line. And the enterprise distributions are what most of the clients of IBM end up using in production. So the Red Hat Enterprise and the SUSE Enterprise and the Ubuntu.
So, what is the kind of core responsibilities of this working group? Is it like, I mean, because the hardware is different when you look at x86 or other ARM or whatever, versus I just want to understand the what do you folks do there?
Yeah, so the whole point of us is getting together and working through bugs together. So across the distributions, we're all using the same software. It's all, we're all packaging Apache, we're all packaging Java, open, GDK and all that. And so when one of us sees a bug, chances are another one of the projects will see the same exact bug. So it's kind of just saying like, hey, we saw this bug. Did you see it as well? And have you engaged with that upstream project, so like OpenGDK, to work with them on a fix? And then we can collaboratively go to that project and say, hey, Fedora has a fix or OpenSUSE has a fix, and then it trickles back down into our projects. So doing that together is much more efficient. And then we also know like, hey, Fedora is going to handle it this time, or Ubuntu is going to handle it this time, and dividing up the workload based on who has that version and who has the time and the bandwidth to work on it. So that's part of the working group. Another one is sometimes different organizations will have different access to the peripherals that the mainframe interacts with. So if I have a specific storage device that you're having errors on, maybe you want to test that on another one, or you want to get resources from IBM, which is kind of where IBM and the role that I'm in comes into this. And also Ulrich from the tools team in Germany, he especially Uli, he has access to more hardware than some of the other groups do. So if someone is seeing an issue or they have a client that has an issue, the working group can help directly connect them with someone in IBM who can help. And traditionally, especially for the community projects, since there's not a formal relationship there, like there would be between SUSE and IBM, or Canonical and IBM, for the community distributions, that is a way for them to talk to someone at IBM much more easily.
As we saw in the early days of ARM, because of when Linux starts supporting ARM, it makes it more power efficient. Is there any kind of, benefits that the rest of the Linux world is enjoying because of the work on mainframe?
Yeah, absolutely. Sustainability has been a huge source of messaging for the latest LinuxONE release. And part of that is around consolidation of workloads. There's a commercial from like long ago that IBM did called Heist, and it was done I think early 2000s, and it was all about like server consolidation. Like, where did all my x86 servers go? And they're like, oh, they just went to one mainframe. And I'm pushing. We're like we should remake that commercial for today, because the story is still true. Because on certain workloads, you can take a lot of those x86 racks and just condense the workloads onto an IBM Z system or LinuxONE machine.
This is going to be a personal question, that with all the shiny, glossy technologies, why you chose mainframe? What attracted you towards mainframe? And
have you seen them? They're beautiful and glossy and shiny. No, I mean, I admit I was a little skeptical when I first started talking to IBM about coming to work on mainframe. But I think for me it was I've always been somewhat interested in other architectures. So I mean, I still play around with ARM and RISC-V, and I still have a Spark system in my home office. So I've always had sort of the interest in the other architectures that are out there. But I also was interested in what value it could bring. Like, in a world where there are all these x86 servers, why do we have these ones, and why have they remained relevant? In fact, in a market that's growing even. So that was just fascinating to me from just a general level, but also a technical level, just being able to work on something that I might not necessarily have ever touched before. So I've learned a tremendous amount. I joined IBM in 2019. So it's been 5 years now, and I've learned a lot, and it's been really fascinating technology. And I've also gotten to do some little side quests and geeking out about the hardware. And I was at one of our test facilities in Poughkeepsie, New York, a couple of weeks ago, and I got to hold one of the chips in my hand, and I got to hold the giant heat sink that goes on the air-cooled ones, and just a general technical curiosity and interest in just seeing what else is out there is what brought me to the technology initially and has kept me there.
If somebody offers you a rock from Mars and the chip in mainframe, which one will you pick?
Oh yeah, the rock from Mars.
Oh, I thought you said
Those are very rare.
You disappointed me.
You know what? Those are very rare, and there's mainframes everywhere. So,
do you have one in your basement yet or not yet?
I don't have one yet, but we did release a rack mount version of the mainframe last year, so it's becoming more possible.
If you just look at your own career and you have a lot of engagement with the community, what efforts are going on to attract more, younger generation towards mainframe? Can you talk about some of those initiatives?
The big thing we've been focusing on is training and skills. So that's what a lot of the teams that I'm working with right now at IBM. So I focus on open source communities and training up people around just awareness of mainframe and the technologies available there and getting your open source on that. But the rest of my team, they go out to universities. They are also working with apprenticeship programs. To bring people from non-traditional backgrounds, get them up to speed with mainframe skills, and then of course work with the Open Mainframe project and the skilling opportunities there. And then just going out having job fairs, and we do some focus on Linux, but also some of the more traditional IBM operating systems and technologies that are available there. But it's been fascinating seeing that community grow, especially through the Open Mainframe Project COBOL course. So we're teaching a lot of students now to program COBOL and bringing up that new generation. And it's been really inspiring hearing some of the stories from the students and the apprentices who have gone through these programs and gotten jobs in the industry. And I'd say the one thing that I found with university students in particular is they're not familiar with the tech landscape in general. So I see a lot of students coming in and they want to do AI or machine learning, or they want to do UI design or some sort of front end thing. And the reason they want to do that is because they don't know what else is out there in the ecosystem. So making it sound interesting and all of us being excited about it goes a long way in saying like, hey, you should take a look at this. Also, there are jobs. So that always helps.
I remember one discussion we had, I think it was the discovery project that you're working on, and you had a mentorship. So can you also talk about anything new at that end?
Yeah, so this is the Open Mainframe Project software discovery tool. And that tool, it allows you to search through various Linux distributions for specific versions of packages. So say you need Apache version something, you can search for that specific version of Apache and see what versions are running are available for each Linux distribution. The big thing we did last summer, so we are part of the Linux Foundation mentorship program, and the big thing we did last summer was, one, we replaced our JSON backend. So it was searching just through JSON files through the web interface, which was, as we kept adding sources and we're getting really excited, it got very slow. So we replaced that with a SQL backend, MySQL backend, and then we also redid the UI, which is still in draft form. So this summer, in 2024, we're going to be working with a student to finalize the refresh of the front end, so it's actually going to look really nice and not like a developer designed it, which is how it looks right now. So,
can you also talk about the folks who do look at Linux on these systems? What kind of resources are available for them?
Yeah, so one of the things the working group really works to do is attach open source projects to resources they need to build on the mainframe. So we worked with the Open Mainframe Project, more broadly last year to put together a Linux resources page. And so this allows projects to find if they need access to a virtual machine or if they need access to a specific continuous integration system for their testing. So we have on there, I'm not going to list them all out, but Circle CI and GitLab and different resources that are free and available to open source communities, just so they know that there are free resources available to them, and then we put it on a nice simple table so that they can access that.
Are you also planning to extend the working group to include more distributions? The question I asked, there are tons of Linux distributions out there. We can go to DistroWatch and see, but there are some other major ones also. Can they target mainframe?
Yeah, so there's a few distributions that have not joined the working group yet that do support the mainframe. We have done some outreach to the other ones to see if we can get them on board, and those discussions are ongoing for sure. The other thing we've been doing is we've gone directly to some of the open source projects that end up coming up in our meetings sometimes and being like, hey, you want to come to our meetings because we tend to engage with your project already in bug reports and on your mailing list and on your project website. Like, would you be interested in joining and finding out more about our community and what the needs are and what the gotchas are, so maybe we don't run into the issues again. So we have had some folks from other upstream communities join our working group as well.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking time out today, and of course talk about Linux working group, Linux distribution working group, the host G systems. Thanks for all those great insights, and I look forward to talk to you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.